The wind howled across the empty plains, carrying with it the scent of dust, smoke, and something almost sorrowful. The young woman stumbled forward, her bare feet dragging across the hard ground, her clothes torn and smeared with dirt, her lips cracked from thirst. Her breaths came in shallow bursts, every step heavier than the last, as though the weight of her past clung to her bones. By the time she reached the small wooden cabin on the edge of the ranch, her vision blurred with exhaustion, and she collapsed against the porch railing, gasping as if it were her last breath. Inside, a cowboy sat quietly, his head tipped forward, boots muddy from long hours in the fields. He had been mending a piece of tack when he heard the faint scrape of wood and the thud of something hitting the porch. Rising from his chair, he stepped outside and saw her there, trembling, dirt streaked across her face, desperation written in her eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke, just the sound of the prairie wind filled the silence. Then, with what little strength she had left, she whispered, "I'm dirty, poor, and barely alive." Her voice cracked, as though even those few words cost her everything she had left. The cowboy's eyes softened. There was a shadow of recognition in them, the kind that only comes from someone who has lived through the same kind of pain. He crouched down, resting one weathered hand on his knee, his voice steady but gentle as he replied, "So was I once. Come inside." His words weren't just an invitation, they were a lifeline. Something in his tone carried more weight than mere kindness. It carried the truth of scars, of battles fought against hunger, loneliness, and despair. For the first time, in what felt like forever, the woman allowed herself to be led. She leaned on him as he guided her into the warmth of his cabin, where the fire flickered against the stone hearth, and the faint smell of stew filled the air. Her body shook as she sank into a chair, her eyes darting around the simple home, sturdy, weather-worn, yet somehow comforting. The cowboy busied himself at the stove, ladling broth into a bowl and placing it before her. She reached for the spoon with trembling hands, but before she could lift it, tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. He leaned against the wooden table, folding his arms across his chest, his gaze distant as though looking back into a past he rarely spoke of. "Because once," he said slowly, "I was the one out there, hungry, lost. No one gave me a hand, not a soul. I clawed my way back from nothing, and I swore that if I ever had enough to share, I'd give it to someone who needed it most. You remind me of me, back then." His words struck her like an arrow, not because they were grand or poetic, but because they were real. She lowered her head, ashamed of her condition, but he shook his head before she could speak again. "You don't owe me anything," he continued. "Survival isn't a debt to be repaid, it's a fire you pass on. You don't quit when you're still breathing." The woman took her first spoonful of soup, warmth spreading through her body, reminding her that she was still alive, still human, still capable of feeling. Her hands steadied, her breaths grew stronger, and slowly, color began to return to her face. She glanced at him again, studying the lines of his weathered face, the strength hidden in his quiet demeanor. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He tipped his hat back, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Name's Caleb," he answered simply. "And you?" She hesitated before replying, as though the sound of her own name had grown foreign to her lips. "Maria," she whispered. The cowboy nodded, repeating it once, almost like he was anchoring her to this place, this moment. "Maria," he said, "you're safe now." Outside, the last rays of the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Inside, the cabin glowed with the soft light of the fire, and for the first time in a long time, Maria felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Caleb sat back down, his rough hands working idly at the leather strap he had abandoned earlier, though his eyes never strayed too far from her. It wasn't pity he carried for her, but something steadier, like quiet respect for the fight it must have taken to make it this far. She could feel it, and it gave her strength she hadn't known she still possessed. And in that small cabin on the edge of the wild plains, two lives, one broken, one rebuilt, found themselves tied together not by chance, but by the shared truth that survival was never meant to be done alone. It was meant to be shared, to be passed on, just as Caleb had said. Maria ate until her body no longer trembled, until her eyes grew heavy, with the kind of exhaustion that no longer threatened to kill her but promised to heal her. She whispered her thanks before sleep took her, and Caleb simply nodded, whispering to the quiet night, "So was I once." Morning light spilled gently through the cabin windows, touching Maria's face with warmth as she stirred from the deepest sleep she had known in years. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was: the soft blanket, the faint smell of coffee, the sound of a horse snorting outside. But then memories of the night before came flooding back. She sat up slowly, glancing toward the hearth where the fire had burned down to embers. And there sat Caleb, the cowboy who had pulled her back from the edge of despair. He was sipping his coffee, hat tilted forward, his eyes half lost in thought. When he noticed she was awake, he gave her a small nod. "Mornin'," he said simply. She muttered a shaky good morning in return, and for the first time in years, she felt almost human again. Caleb slid a plate toward her: biscuits, eggs, and a bit of bacon. "Eat," he urged gently. "You've got to get your strength back. The fight's not over just 'cause you made it here." She picked up the fork with trembling fingers, her hunger sharp and real now that she had a chance to satisfy it. As she ate, he watched her silently, not with judgment, but with a quiet sort of pride that she hadn't given up. When she finished, she leaned back, eyes glistening. "I thought I was done," she admitted. "I thought the world had no place left for me." Caleb leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice steady but carrying weight. "The world will chew you up if you let it. But here's the truth: no matter how far you fall, if you're still breathing, you've still got a fight left. And I'll be damned if I let someone who made it this far quit now." Maria blinked at him, stunned by the strength in his words. "Why me?" she asked softly. Caleb's jaw tightened, and he looked out the window toward the wide open land that stretched for miles. "Because I see myself in you," he answered. "Years ago, I came through this same land: no food, no home, no hope. I wanted to lay down and quit, but I didn't. Somehow, I found a man who gave me a hand, same as I'm giving you now. That man saved my life without a skin for a thing in return. Said to me, 'Pass it on when you can.' So here I am doing just that." Silence fell between them for a moment, heavy with meaning. Maria lowered her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, not from sorrow this time, but from a fragile kind of relief she hadn't known in so long. She whispered, "I don't know what I can offer, but I swear I'll try." Caleb shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You don't owe me a thing, but if you stay, you'll have a roof, a meal, and work to do. This ranch'll keep you busy enough, and maybe that'll help you find your footing again." For the first time in what felt like forever, Maria let out a laugh, small, shaky, but real. "Work," she said. "I think I can manage that." The days turned into weeks. Maria grew stronger, her cheeks regaining color, her steps gaining steadiness. She learned to tend to the animals, cook over the old wood stove, and ride a horse with a confidence she never imagined she'd have. Caleb watched her with quiet satisfaction, never saying much, but always there, steady as the land itself. Some nights, when the prairie sky burned with stars, Maria would sit on the porch beside him. They wouldn't speak, not much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. She knew she had found not just shelter, but a reason to keep going. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the horizon in shades of fire and gold, Maria turned to Caleb, her voice soft but sure. "You saved me," she said. Caleb shook his head slowly. "No," he replied, his eyes fixed on the distance. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it." She swallowed the lump in her throat, realizing the truth of his words. She had clawed her way here, and though Caleb had opened the door, it was her strength that had carried her through. As autumn settled across the plains, Maria no longer looked like the broken woman who had staggered to the cabin that night. She carried herself with quiet strength now, her eyes brighter, her voice firmer. And Caleb, though still the same rugged cowboy, found himself changed as well. For years, he had lived alone, convincing himself he needed no one. But Maria's presence reminded him of something he had long forgotten: that life, no matter how hard, was not meant to be lived in silence and solitude. One crisp evening, as they finished their work and sat by the fire, Maria looked at him and whispered, "You gave me a second chance at life, Caleb. I won't waste it." He tipped his hat, his voice low but filled with emotion. "And you gave me something too." Maria, you reminded me what it means to keep living, not just surviving. Their eyes met across the firelight, and in that quiet moment, both of them knew they were no longer two broken souls. They were a new beginning, forged not by chance, but by the strength it takes to rise again. And so the story ended not with despair, but with hope to lives that had been shattered by hardship, now bound together by resilience, kindness, and the unshakable will to endure. Out there, on the edge of the wild plains, in a simple cabin lit by firelight, Maria and Caleb found what the world had stolen from them, a reason to believe again.